of ability. But once he gets up the 51-degree slope, it's up to the riders to give it a go. Now, it's a three-day event. Friday and Saturday are the elimination heats. Sunday sees just the top 100 riders competing for the event itself. The riders have come here with just one thought in mind: to get up that hill. I would have thought perhaps pushing the choke in might have been a start there, but after all, who am I to comment? The organisers accepted a mere 250 entries, but more than 300 men turned up with machines, and they let them all start, so there you go, so much for organisation. And 8 countries represented, from as far away as Spain to the west, and Greece, amazingly, to the east, coming here to this little hamlet in the Austrian Tyrol for this rather spectacular 3 days eventing. Teufelswand is translated as the Wall of the Devil, and that is the local colloquialism for this muddy track, or in this case, since it's nice and dry, earthy track. And the basic principle clearly is to get as far as possible and then step off before the bike has a chance to knock you over and cartwheel its way down to the bottom of the slope. And as you might expect from having seen a few of these early tries, an awful lot of bike spare parts people are here as well. It's not always the case that the bike gets off as lightly as some of these have. It does take a degree of guts to be sitting on one of these machines. It's not always the bike that comes off feeling slightly second-hand, as you can imagine again. And don't forget that when you're trying to wrestle this thing, it is at head height and above, trying to cartwheel itself back down the hill. So cuts and scrapes are probably nothing out of the ordinary. They really are barking, aren't they? Now there's the big problem when you're downhill and the bike is heading that way. The marshals along the side of the course step in as soon as they reasonably think it's safe to give it a go. Oh, now there you go, going for the diesel approach. High gear, a few revs, and absolutely no hope whatsoever. The idea here basically is to give it loads of welly and to just hang on. And very wisely stepping off at the appropriate time will be just the thing. This is Mike Kaczynski from the east of Germany. An experienced rider here, was here last year. You thought he would have learned the lesson about falling machinery, wouldn't you? But there you go. Lots of support from a very vocal and highly enthusiastic crowd, and antics like that are the sort of thing they've come to see. Absolutely lost from the moment he crossed the start line. And he was one of our furthest travelled. Oh yes, take the easy route down. Now that is smooth, if nothing else. Points for cool. Previous rider who fell, Yanis Polinas from Greece. This is Manfred Kraml from Germany. He's going to have to go down the long, hard way. Germany's Franz Böhler, making sure that they know exactly how high he's got. This is Norbert Romer, and the reason for the pig is apparently a piggy implement is the equivalent in Germany of a rabbit's foot. I'd have thought changing down a gear would have been a slightly more useful ploy for getting up the hill than having a stuffed pig on the front lug guard, but there you go. He's obviously not going to get too badly damaged. The first motorcycle complete with airbags. Sadly, the riding ability of Coco the Clown hasn't really helped him much. Now this is, I shudder to imagine what sort of a pub drinking session came up with this. A hill climbing scooter. And as you can see, development is in the early stages. Mike Kaczynski having another go. Oh, really, Mike, this bike comes down. And obviously the spectators full of sympathy for him. Get ice better, wheeling all the way up, and then scrabbling all the way back down. Franz Goldhammer. Now he's really giving it some large on the throttle, and that turns into wheelies just at the 115-metre mark as well. And presumably the reason he was on full throttle was nothing to do with him. It seems to be just the way the bike likes to be. Yes, approach with discretion. Don't two-strokes just love being held at full throttle ceaselessly? You would think maybe that the ignition switch would have been a better thing to go for there than an obviously jammed throttle, but up to him. Dear. Yes, all very worryingly similar, isn't it? Get your foot out of the wheel. That's not going to help. This is Harold Schneider. So far, so good. And so far is as far as he goes. Taking no chances, making sure the machine is well dead before he approaches it. Something that Tobias Kroner should have done before he approached the slope, I think. Well, again, points for style for getting it down the right way. And at least switching it off when you stall it means that it won't then rev the nuts off itself for the next 10 minutes. And I don't think that smarted on the way back down. This is Martin Kollau. He gets to 135 metres, then sends the bike on for another 5 metres without him. Now, do they measure it from where he originally stops or where the bike comes to rest? Hopefully it's the former. 130, 135. That's getting very close to the highest ride so far. Thomas Rinner just on 140 metres, 460 feet. And as it gets drier, the grip is getting better, although not everybody seems to be able to exploit that, of course. Plenty of talk from the big singles, but I don't really think that they're the way to go. Certainly the two-strokes seem to have at least as much life in them as the fours. And some of the two-stroke riders seem pretty keen to get down the hill as well. Oh, down the airbag man, here he comes again. Clearly at a loss to explain why the bubble gum in the gents lasts so long. He figures that if he inflates it and sticks it to the bike, then it might be the reason that it was designed. Somebody really ought to explain what those machines are for. Well, I did mention that the grip was getting better. Clearly it's even grippy around the edges as well. Well, if in doubt, aim for the cameraman. Oof! Poor shot. There would have been maximum exposure on Eurosport for having slain a cameraman with a bike. And that just goes to show that our cameramen are not always nancying around as far from the action as possible. Sometimes the action does come to you when you're a cameraman. Now, I'm given to believe that this gentleman's name is Peter Schneeweiss from Austria, having a running tag match with his bike. Schneeweiss, for those of you unfamiliar with the German language, or more unfamiliar than I am perhaps, is Snow White. Possibly a nom de plume, or nom de moto, as the French would probably have it nowadays. Either that, or he probably had a very tough life as a child. This is Manfred Krammel. I'm afraid aiming uphill at the camera is going to get you nothing, but very cool for collecting a piece of mountain as it hurtles towards you, I suppose. And a lot softer than catching the bike as well. 140, 145. That's excellent riding from the Belgian Stefan Lilo. I can't believe it's actually pronounced Lilo. 489 feet. Third in the elimination heats. And that safely sees him into the best 100 so far, which means that he should go straight through to Sunday. Well, that was never really going to happen, was it? This is Hans-Peter Merz. Well, it saves him the walk. Thought he was just going to do a quick 360 and have another shot at it, but the bike had other ideas. This is Klaus Lanscher from the Southern Tyrol. And proving just there that the banks around the edge of the track are a great deal steeper than the main track itself, and so there's really pretty little point in using them. Michael Schopf gets right up there to the 135 and is determined not to have to follow the bike all the way down if he can help it, but he can't. So that's another trip to Husqvarna's dealers for some more bits. Now, having nearly had to nod one out of the way with his forehead earlier on, the cameraman seems to have become a rather impressive focal target. And that gentleman trying to headbutt him with his machinery and then by himself as well. Now, this chap is obviously running on a shoestring, and that's about all he can afford, borrowing somebody else's kit and bicycle. I'm afraid too much aerodynamic lift there from the sombrero, just pulls him up into a wheelie before he even gets to the markers, so that didn't work at all. Germany's Uwe Hager going rather more impressively up the hill and dressed rather more suitably for it, taking this a wee bit more seriously. And this is Andy Zimmerer from Garmisch-Partenkirchen, who is currently running 7th overall in the Off-Road Challenge Series, and that will comfortably put him into the elimination, out through the elimination heats into Sunday's runoffs. Well, the previous rider was on a Honda, although he showed allegiance on his clothing to Husqvarna. That's another Honda, even though the rider claims to be a KTM man by his clothing. This man obviously affiliated very closely with the Bridgestone tyre operation. Hannes Gersthofer is actually on a KTM, all over a KTM in fact. And this is Herr Gruber, Stefan Gruber in fact, from Germany, probably no relation whatsoever to Herr Gruber from Heidi High. It wasn't Heidi High at all, was it? It'll come to me, I'll say it only once later. Now, if it wasn't bad enough that the bike was inflicting major damage on its rider, it then goes and inflicts major damage on itself as well. That was an entirely unsatisfactory ride from that young man. Another local, Manfred Kainz from Austria, and he and Germany's Gunther Rodel hold the current course record from last year's event, 499 feet, 493 on his first run, getting close. That's him second overall at the moment in the eliminators. afraid the next bunch aren't going to be half as close as that, but there's certainly no slouches in the entertainment business. It was Allo Allo, of course, just before the break, in which Herr Gruber featured. We'll be back with more action in a moment. Welcome back to the Off-Road Magazine. Just having a little bit of problem with the microphone button there. Sort that out with a hammer later. Saturday morning. Although, as you can tell, not many of the party revellers for Whichreed competitors have actually spotted it at this stage. I'm sure the first runs up the hill, though, as the elimination contest continues, will wake anybody who really enjoyed themselves Friday evening and is still to emerge. So the riders hard at it. The Germaline concession will have been in action overnight, supplying all sorts of ointments and gubbins for cuts and bruises. And here they go again. Now, after a day's elimination, most of the riders have figured out how to get a reasonable distance up the hill. All that remains, of course, is to learn how to stop the bike squashing them on the way back down. We just saw Hubert Honner make it up to 443 feet, and the bike stopped. Michael Stopp was a long way further than that yesterday. Oh dear. Temper, temper. And here is Michael Stopp. Consistently impressive. Look at the way he's thundering the machine up there, just under the 150-metre mark, 486 feet. Fourth in the overall classifications. And this is Philipp Schneeberger of Switzerland, happy with 430 feet. Jürgen Bick not quite so happy, raising his arms for an entirely different reason. Oi, get off, I think was probably the cry. Thomas Nigel from Germany. And I think there it's a combination of rider and bike shouting at each other, oi, get off. Jochen Stammer from Germany. Oh dear. Looks so cool there, and just that final little snap of the throttle, and the bike headed off down the hill on its own. This is Dan, the borrowed bits and pieces man. He's going to have to go and borrow some more bits and pieces at this rate. Yes, he's still wearing yesterday's sweat trousers and rather mucky t-shirt, making sure he's seen by other road users. Is Michael Gerber. Everybody's likely to spot him on his way up. This is Hans Freundorfer from Germany. And not bad at all. 125 metres, just under 443 feet. And bear in mind that this slope is so steep that you can barely stand upright on it. Hans-Peter Marz getting further than yesterday. And if you think the bike's taking a tumble, so too did the rider. In fact, he dislocated his shoulder. Beg your pardon, that was Hans-Peter Marz. And that was the fall that did the damage. Seemingly finding the only piece of rock on an otherwise entirely dirt-laden hillside. Germany's Uwe Gewanka. Switzerland's Walter Schudel Yesterday he managed 470 feet, and on Saturday morning matches it to the inch, or as close as they measure these things. Run away is the shout. Now as the track starts to... Oh my word! As the track starts to cut up, that big rut there just before the 130 metre mark is really starting to catch them out. They get to 360 feet, or don't, as the case may be with Big Chief running nose here. And that flick really catches them out. A big step there, right on the 130 metre mark. You can see he's right over it there, straddling it. And they're all suffering. Now, we've seen this way of holding onto your bike used before, and I have to say I'm sure that hanging onto the handlebars is probably less painful. Germany's Christian Pfeiffer. He's a trials acrobat. Apparently he practices his skills by riding his motorcycle around his parents' roof. Well, I suppose he could be out crashing their car, so it's sort of one step better, probably. Depends what their roof looks like after it, I suppose. Pfeiffer, who we just saw, is the Off-Road Challenge Series leader at the moment. 486 feet he managed on that previous run. Oh dear. He spent a bit less time blowing up inflatables and a bit more time trying to get the wretched little bike to rev more than 2,000 RPM. He might get a little further. Austria's Franz Goldhammer, we saw him earlier on. That's what he looks like, look. He's old. He ought to have more sense. Another Austrian, Harry Vashnik. Don't know if he's any older, but he ought to have more sense than to hurl the bike another 20 yards up the slope as well. Because of course it's going to come down out of control. This is Mario Abicik. Here's a man who has pioneered some very odd routes up the slope. Oh, really? First gear. Fourth gear is for going back down. Wolfgang Schuttenkopf. Go back and read the instructions. Just for a moment, I'm sure the rider at the bottom also thought that he was going to get hit by that man coming down the slope. Now that was quite a good crash. Whoops, away it goes. Exit Carl Fiedler, stage left. Exit bike, stage diving into the main body of the auditorium. Given another couple of 100 yards run up, it would probably have surfed its way right across the crowd. Altogether, not the straightest of machines that Carl Fiedler has ever seen, probably. Mighty impressive. He seemed mighty impressed with it anyway. Germany's Jens Bockmann gets a rather better result despite the clearly Germanic headgear. Here we go again. Now let's see if he can at least miss the guy at the bottom. Being thumped before you get a chance to start isn't really anybody's idea of fun. And Germany's Mirko Dittel gets himself just over that little 130 metre hump, which has been dug out nicely. Boy, when they get rid of that mud, does it get rocky up there? Oh no, it's still in operation, as old Snow White finds out. Peter Schneeweiss, the Austrian. wasn't the most comfortable landing I've ever seen, that's for certain. Germany's Sebastian Grieser again gets to the bogey mark as the dragging wrecked bike's bucket shadow passes overhead to go back to the top of the slope to drag another wrecked bike away. Ronnie Lawrence putting in a little chicane halfway up the hill. Now, was that entirely necessary, that shot? I rather fancy not. Christian Pfeiffer here doing an extremely good job of getting up, holding on, turning around and rather casually sauntering back down. Very good indeed. And he's the man from the roof, don't forget. Not that one, the previous one, Christian Pfeiffer. That was Frank Bowler we just saw. Again, that bogey mark. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. That's traditional Austrian headgear, allegedly. Fuel tank, that'll be handy for the next run. Germany's Sonny Sonterheimer doesn't even get as far as the 130 mark. Nice pink and purple duds though, Sonny. This is one of the Spanish entries. Juan Caceres. Actually using the gearbox up the hill and paying the price, I'm afraid. The bike clearly did not enjoy that very much. Yeah, go for the kill. You just know this man's an Austrian, don't you? And you're right, he is Günther Schopel. And no, that's not cowbells you can hear. Those are the metal plates he's had inserted since last year's run. No, in fact, of course, they are cowbells. Although I wouldn't be surprised to find out that at some stage in his life he did have a fairly major blow to the head. Now, we've seen this guy before. That was Eric Lancia from the Southern Tyrol. He seemed to be in rather better form yesterday. In fact, he seems to be in rather better form on the way up, in all fairness. Andre Rockhauser from Germany. Not sure that the crowd even knew what was going on there. He was laying such a smoke screen behind him. I think from the crowd commentary, they probably gathered that he'd rather chucked it away. For want of a more descriptive phrase. Throwing it away over the top of your head is not something that many motorcycle riders will do, though. I guess that'll be about the 140-metre mark there by Walter Schudel. The mare's won just about 120, no, 115, no, 110. In fact, of course, it's marked from the highest. Now, this is, it will probably not surprise you to learn, a Frenchman, Louis Guéperet. And this machine has twin Husqvarna engines. The sand drag tyre, well, maybe we'll contemplate the possibilities of that being a good idea or not later on. 140 metres for him, though, 466 feet. And that was a fairly impressive run there for Werner Müller, winner of last year's hill climb. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I can tell you that was Stefan Roma of Germany being easy on the machinery, rather hopeless in fact on the machinery, and Hubert Grill from Austria driving like a complete and utter grill. gear change, but to no avail. That'll be a handlebar change, a new tank, an exhaust system, and probably some foot pegs as well. This is another one of these balmy Frenchmen. This is Laurent Pignard. It's got a 4-cylinder Suzuki engine. Sounds the business, I have to say. 1100cc and 130 horsepower and 300 feet. Oh dear. Lars Non of Germany, former rider in the World Enduro Championship Series, so he's used to keeping his foot in or his throttle cracked open. Not a bad ride. Change down, change down, change down. It's like my mum driving up a hill here, isn't it? Up the hill in fourth, down the hill with a nut screaming off it in second. Wolfgang Schuttenberg of Austria gets some driving lessons. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh, please, not the cameraman. Fortunately, they got the cameraman instead of the machinery, so that's all well and good. Michael Vogler here, another man who'll be heading off to the spare parts department and the St John's ambulance, not necessarily in that order. And that brings us pretty much to the end of the second day of elimination heats. And we're running short of cameramen as well, so they better sharpen up for tomorrow, I think. Quite a lot in some cases. But before the Sunday's activities, a chance to get some more plasters on those scuffed knees and look at a rather old MZ. Bit of a barbecue, a few beers, a bit more of barbecue, a few more beers, and then follow that off with supper, which is a barbecue and beer. We'll be back in a moment or two, get the barbecue on. See you in a while. Welcome back then. The bell tolls for the competitors on the third and final day of the Rachel hill climb. And it's the day that actually counts for something. The elimination heats have progressed nicely on a drying track. So, of course, hard, heavy overnight rain has turned it into a real slippery quagmire. The traction levels are going to be extremely low, which means that the spectators who have braved the rain are going to have a thoroughly entertaining day. And here is the barking Austrian again. Now, only the top 100 of the previous 300 elimination competitors were supposed to take the start, but the organisers, as is their wont, extended the entries to the best 120, special exceptions, and I think we're probably looking at some of these here right now, aren't we? Extending it to 125. So 125 entries and the special exceptions coming from the 125cc class, fittingly enough, for special outfits, presumably for ladies and for children. After an hour or so of rather futile grinding up the slope, a slightly drier substratum as opposed to a racing line starts to appear, and the climbs are starting to become a little more fruitful, hence the rather over-ambitious clothing seems to have disappeared and the serious stuff is starting to come on. And now the crowd is starting to see some slightly higher times. Whether anybody will get to last year's record or even up into the 400s, it's really hard to tell. And here with his full German police uniform on, except for the boots, is pretty clearly a German police officer on his day off. Yeah, but there you are, little man, you get that uniform dirty, you'll be on a charge quicker than you can say boot or goose. Ah, curses, he was probably saying. Again, getting to this critical dip, and we're just at it right there. A big flick up where the bike gets almost vertical if you're not careful. And that was yesterday's highest rider. Karl-Heinz Holtz running second in the off-road challenge. And none of the leaders can really afford to miss out on the points here. This is his first time on a hill climb event. Boink, spits the bike up to the 125 mark. Günther Schoppel of Austria at or around the same area as well. You know what they say about a boomerang always coming back? It's not just boomerangs, is it? This is hill climb ace Karl Schmidinger carrying the number 1. Well, at the back at any rate. 238 on the front. Third place last year at Wachau. And as you can see, always has things firmly under control. Won the events at Moln, the hill climbs at Moln last year and this. And looking to score favourably here as well. If there's anything left of that once it gets down to the bottom of the hill. And in fact, it looks as though the bike may even make its way back into the paddock before it stops going. People previously safe just over the Austro-Hungarian border may be running for cover. Manfred Kainz about to get deadly serious, I think. And before that, Karl Schmidinger of Austria setting a new mark, 150 metres. Mighty impressive. That was Manfred Kainz, 493 feet. Last year, in fact, he also managed the highest climb, but it was the second run that counted for victory, and he didn't go so far in there. This year, however, it takes you, whenever you make your highest climb, it will be taken as your best run. That was Petra Huber of Germany, one of the women in the event. And, oh dear. Back by popular demand. Apparently, this is Hans Steiner from Austria, would you believe? Last year he started out at the... oh no, this is too painful even to watch. I'll tell you the information instead. Started out at 493 metres and skied all the way down to the start ramp. This year he outdid himself rather by starting at 560 feet and skied all the way down to 550 before he lost it. And there you go. And from there, I think he was probably beginning to think that was not such a good idea as it had been the night before. Apparently this man holds the world record for skiing on gravel. He's been pulled by a Porsche at up to 149.6 miles an hour. He was injured enough to need to go to hospital after that, which probably at least was mighty grateful for you. For him at least, it stops him having another go. Louis Guéperet of France, getting less far than he did yesterday with the twin-engine machine. And, oh, no. You're just pretty sure that these guys are Austrian as well, aren't they? They couldn't quite afford a bike each, so they didn't quite build a bike each. You don't have to turn around the top of the mountain, the idea being that your partner drives you down. This is Laurent Pignard with the 1100cc machine. Still sounds fantastic. And this is Jean-Pierre Garral, third in the special event when they take on the Monte Impossible hill climb. That's the Impossible Mountain, for those of you that speak less than I do. They have whopping great studs out of the back of those big fat tyres as well, shedding bits as he goes up. What started as a Honda will become less than a Honda on the way up the hill. Probably less than a Honda on the way down as well if he's not careful. Yeah, I'd leave it there too. That was Petra Huber from Flinsbach in Germany. That was very probably 2 Austrians as well. I'm sorry if Austria's getting a bit of a rough go from it here, but it is all their fault. I mean, they sort of, you know, ask people to come and do this stuff. Werner Eros from Austria. So apologies really, honestly, to any Austrians listening in English. You know where to complain to. Normal address. It's that bloke Martin again. The KTM jersey on the Honda bike still seems to be a bit jinxed for that man. Swiss Walter Schudel made it past 460 feet consistently in all his elimination runs. He's getting close to the mark. Just past it again. Just again beyond the 140 metres, 460 feet mark. He really is very, very consistent indeed. Excellent riding. First thing those masters have had to do all day long, in fact. 470 feet puts him in second overall. This is Werner Muller, last year's champion. 486 feet he managed in the eliminations. It stops just short, I would say, Schudel's mark. 470 feet, in fact, they're giving him. So it's a ride-off. Walter Schudel goes first, but he didn't turn the fuel on. Unbelievable. He looks back and hopes against hope that they'll give him another go, but they count that as a start. So Werner Muller has to get further than he did, and he has. But the Austrian gives it his best shot. Past 140. Is he going to get to 150? He isn't. But Werner Muller gets to second overall. Manfred Kainz, the winner. Werner Muller second, so 1 and 2 for Austria. Third for Walter Schudel of Switzerland. Surprisingly, with the lack of mountains in their country, Dutch not getting much of a look in. So that's the Wachau hill climb, its second year. Doubtless it will be back next season. Don't expect anybody